Last weekend we saw as the statue of Edward Colson was torn down, didn't we? And what we've seen since then is other statues that have been defaced, and some other people coming out to defend and to protest and to protect those statues. And we've got some people who, as Edward Colson's statue come down, they cheer and they say, yes, look, here was not somebody who we should be following. Here was somebody who was a slaver and a murderer, and it's right that he comes down. We've got other people who say, perhaps he should have been brought down, but he shouldn't have been brought down like that. And we've got yet others who say, yeah, maybe what he did was wrong, but actually he did a lot of stuff for that city and should be around. Statues are hugely symbolic. And so how should we be thinking about statues? See, the problem with any statue is that as it stands up there, it stands as somebody who you say, this is a great man and we in some ways should follow after him. This is a great woman and in some ways we should follow after her. Someone like Winston Churchill should be celebrated. Or Lord Baden-Powell, the guy who created the Scouts, or Charles Darwin. In some ways people say they should be celebrated, huge influences, and yet others would say, well look, some of what they've done is great, but others of what they've done is not so great. Charles Darwin, for example, said things about people that would be considered hate speech. He's the father of what's known as social Darwinism, which is utterly racist in its viewpoints. Should we be having a statue of him? You see, the problem with having a statue is that we set somebody up as either blameless or we need to get rid of the statue. And of course the problem there is that whenever I make a statue of anybody, there will be areas of their life that I want to say, follow that, and things in their life that I want to say, don't follow that, whatever you do. There'll be areas of kind of cultural blindness that if you were to put up a statue of you or me from today, people in 100 years' time will look back at us and say, yeah, but they thought this. And the problem is because those are areas of cultural blindness, they're areas where we kind of go along with things without really even seeing the injustice that's there. I don't know what it might be. Maybe they'll say, you know, that those people, yeah, they cared hugely about Black Lives Matter in the UK, and yet they carried on with, you know, third world debt, where whole countries were paying back debts to rich Western countries in a way that they could never afford to do. Oh yeah, they cared about Black Lives Matter, but they didn't care about that. Or maybe they'll look back at us and they'll say, they cared about Black Lives Matter, but they didn't care about the modern day slavery that was there then. The 10,000 people in the UK, 10,000 people in the UK who were involved in slavery last year. Maybe they'll look at us and they'll say they rightly grieved the 40,000 people who died from coronavirus at the start of 2020, but they were absolutely fine about the 83,000 lives that were lost through abortion in 2019. You might be thinking that's a totally separate argument, but what I'm saying is that there are cultural blindnesses, cultural things that go on all around us that we may be going along with that we're not even thinking about. And as soon as we put a statue up, what we're doing is we're saying, follow this person. And we need to recognise there'll be areas of their life that you want to say, okay, and areas of their life that you want to say, really no. Because the problem is whenever I put anybody on a pedestal, well, they're not perfect. In the Bible, it's really clear that the leaders throughout the Bible aren't perfect. Take Abraham, the father of nations, and he said of his wife, oh, she's my sister. Yes, king, you can do what you want with her, because she's only my sister, she's not my wife. Or David, a king, archetypal king, one who is looked back to again and again and again, and yet the Bible's really clear that he murdered somebody because he'd slept with his wife. David slept with his wife and then murdered the guy because he didn't want to own up to it. Or Peter, he's one of the kind of inner circles of Jesus's apostles, and we're told when Jesus is arrested, he runs. He's scared. Later on, we're told that he's confronted by one of his fellow apostles because he's basically saying that people had to become kind of ethnically Jewish in order to be Christians. You see, the Bible's really clear about its leaders. It portrays them kind of warts and all except for one person. Jesus. Again, it's perfectly clear about him, but it doesn't have a bad word to say, because Jesus is the one who knew no sin. If you like, Jesus is the only one whose statue I could put up and know that nobody could point the finger at him and say there's something wrong with him. And yet, when Jesus came, and Jesus lived this perfect life, what we did is we killed him, we kind of pushed him away, we said, I don't want you. Why? Because as he lives this perfect life, he exposes the way in which I'm not. And I don't like that. Now here's the challenge for us. One challenge that we have as we confront kind of institutional racism, as a country, as we kind of mourn and are shocked at the tragic murder of George Floyd, one of the dangers is that we turn our anger on our past and we say, what I want to do is I want to cover that up. I want that away from me because I don't want it to expose actually the kind of shame that I'm feeling at the moment about the ways in which my country, and maybe I implicitly, have treated others. The danger is we do it with statues. But the danger is also that we do it with ourselves. We hide away. We cover over those areas where we think there's shame there. And yet what the Bible does is clear that the way in which we deal with those things is first of all that we let Jesus expose them in us. That I read this book and I see one who perfectly loved everybody, and I let that challenge my kind of social norms. I let that speak and challenge me where I'm blind, where I oppress others. But then I give those things to Jesus. The Bible says God made him who was without sin to be sin for us. That as Jesus died on the cross, he died to take my sin, to take the ways in which I reject and oppress others on himself, and to offer me a perfect relationship with God. And that's then the start of the place where I can begin to address areas of kind of cultural blindness, where I can really truly listen and change, is when I realise that I can expose all of those to God. I can say, I've got it all. I can hand those over and know that he can deal with them. And if that's something you'd like to find out more about, please do leave us a message, get in touch with us. We'd love to hear from you. But for the moment, thank you so much for listening. Stay safe.